A theme for what's going on many levels currently is in the future there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed or hidden that will not be made known. What you have said in the dark will be heard in the daylight. What you have whispered in the ear in the inner rooms will be proclaimed from the rooftops. It's going to be a common theme going forward. Right, let's get into the news and views from around the world. And we've got a number of op-ed pieces tonight and a load of questions to get through. So last week, the military parade, which was expected to be in November, has now been pushed back to 2019. This was expected due to various ongoing issues at all the levels, funding being one of them, which is still to be settled, but maybe we've had some breakthroughs in that, and we'll see what happens in the future. Now, the event was originally scheduled to occur the day before Veterans Day, but is now being moved back to an unknown date in 2019. And the Department of Defense and White House have been planning the parade to honour America's military veterans and commemorate the centennial of World War I. And it was targeted for November the 10th, which is just one day after World Freedom Day. Trump declared it whilst in China last year that November the 9th would be World Freedom Day. And so this parade was kind of linked, but with the ongoing issues in every country, it's now being pushed back. The Pentagon did not offer a reason for the delay. Then that's not a surprise sometimes. Dissension in the Democratic camp, and they are calling for a fresh start and abandoning Democratic congressional leadership, and especially House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. Not surprised. She's like Hillary, is a complete liability. But Pelosi and other top Democrats held a press in Los Angeles last Wednesday, touting a new campaign agenda featuring the slogan, "A Better Deal." A bit like Obama with this change. Better change. It's all going to change. No, it never. It went worse. Literally. And we've had enough of those memes that mean nothing. However, several House Democrats have now called for the minority leader to step down following the Democrats' losing streak of 4 special elections. As a side note to that, if, as expected, these sealed documents will all get released, and the reality is all politicians have been involved in some form of crime. Democrats have been more so involved in the more heinous levels of crime, the ones that most people are just not going to forgive or forget, for that matter. And the question remains, if that's the case and Anne gets thrown under the bus, where did the Democrats go from there? Because it's not just involving Anne. You know, if the heinous levels of crime come out about what the Democrats have been doing and their history with the KKK, real history, then I can't see any American voting Democrat for many generations. They'll be unelectable. So that only leaves one party. Maybe then we can disband that party and just get people to work for the people, not for parties, not for deep states, not for oligarchs or families and bloodlines, for the people, just doing the job. And if you don't do your job properly, you get fired. Simple as that. Not protected by party interests. So that's something to watch out for. But there's a lot of dissension in the Democrats. They're all trying to protect their own backs. And they're all throwing each other under the bus, which is good for us because we'll get more disclosure. A bit like the factions. There's something that's I thought was beneficial, given we talked about student loan last week. The New York University School of Medicine will provide free tuition for all present and future students. The university announced this week, citing the risk of overwhelming debt. It says every student will qualify regardless of merit or financial need. And the NYU said financial worries were driving graduates to more lucrative specialities, pushing doctors away from more general positions. And the scholarship covers annual tuition costs of up to $55,000. And a study produced by the Association of American Medical Colleges estimated that in 2017, 75% of medical students graduated in debt. We're just not giving the children a chance. But here's a worse figure. To learn stupidity and non-cures, the average debt level was $190,000. How is anyone going to pay that back? And the university has reportedly been working for more than a decade to accrue the necessary funds to pay for tuition and hopes to raise a total of $600 million to make the scholarships available permanently. Students must still, however, cover the cost of living expenses and accommodation. A nice start. 5% tax on all the deep state corporations that pay no tax would wipe out student debt overnight. Time to get it done. Now, last week, or last weekend I think it was, there was 9 planes were forced to make emergency landings en routes in Chile, Argentina and Peru. And these were because of bomb threats issued to Chile's Civil Aviation Authority, and its Director General told journalists that 11 threats were made in total, and 2 of which were fictitious and 9 which were related to existing flights. All the planes were declared free of explosives, and at least 1 plane later was allowed to resume its flight. This is something to do with threatening all the Central and South American countries, all initiated by the UN, the IMF and the World Bank. We'll have more on them later. Now the bomb, there was a recent bombing in Yemen that caused much destruction, and it was an attack on a school bus. Now the sad thing is that weapon was sold as part of a US State Department sanctioned arms deal with Saudi Arabia. And these were working with local Yemeni journalists and munitions experts, and Clinton News Network, so commonly known as CNN, has established that the weapon that left dozens of children dead on August 9th was a 500-pound laser-guided Mk-82 bomb, which is made by Lockheed Martin. And the bomb is very similar to one that wreaked devastation in an attack on a funeral hall in Yemen in October of 2016, which killed 155 people and injured hundreds more. Now, the Saudi coalition blamed incorrect information for that strike, admitted it was a mistake and took responsibility. Yeah, right. you don't make mistakes with laser-guided bombs. Sorry. Here's a story that was not heavily publicised because it's too much of a good news story. But I've been talking about North and South Korea reunification now for 3 or 4 years, even before THI started. And here it is, further evidence. Last weekend, a group of elderly South Koreans arrived in North Korea to meet relatives they have not seen since the Korean War of 1950 to 1953. The war left the Korean peninsula divided, and people who lived on the northern side were unable to leave, and the two Koreas, which are technically still at war, which is an illusion, have organised reunion events before, but this is the first in 3 years. Now, it was all decided and chosen by a lottery, and the oldest of them was 101. 100 people were chosen from each side to attend the reunion, and some of them dropped out after realising the relatives they had hoped to see were no longer alive. So in total, there was 83 North Koreans and 89 from the south. One woman who was aged 92 told reporters she was going to be seeing her son for the first time since 1953. Just shocking. She lost track of her son, who was then aged 4, and her husband in a panic of trying to flee. I never imagined this day would come, she said. I didn't even know if he was alive or not. So it's a sad story, but a good a sign of the changes that are going on globally. It's not all about America. There's changes going on, some very subtle, some right in your face, and far more to come in the future. Tesla CEO Elon Musk, now in a bit of panic mode, said on Monday he's still in talks with potential backers of a possible buyout of the company, including Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, really, but had not completed securing the funding. He's now going to JP Morgan, really. Like they've got any money either. Musk said the Saudi fund had been pushing to take the electronic car maker private in talks dating back nearly 2 years, and also backed the deal last week. And the Post kind of fleshed out the Silicon Valley's billionaire's shock announcement on August the 7th that he was considering taking the company private and had secured funding, but that appears not to be the case currently. Facebook again has decided to delete the left-leaning, whatever that means, Latin American news network Telesur, and that's an English language page with no explanation, and this has added to further concerns about over censorship and the US government's interference on the platform. I will say again, it's not US government interference, it's deep state. Wherever they blame the government, ignore it. They have no power. I said that in the last 2 shows. Now they were deleted, the company Telesur, last year or earlier this year, and would have been even more careful with its posts and broke absolutely none of Facebook's terms, according to the director, and yet was still booted by Facebook. Facebook is not going to last much longer. Ministry of Justice come under fire. It's still paying security firms G4S and Serco. We've covered both of them in this show, and millions of pounds every month for supplying electronic tagging equipment This is more than a year after both companies were barred from running the contract. Really? Now, both companies are facing criminal investigations by the Serious Fraud Office over allegations of overcharging that led them to be paying near £180 million. This is the UK Ministry of Justice. And the continuing monthly payments to the two companies were uncovered by an analyst of the Ministry of Justice, data by the Centre for Crimes and Justice Studies, which showed that G4S was paid a total of £8.7 million when it had already lost the tagging contract. Serco was also overpaid by £4.5 million over the same period. This is March 2014 through 2015. Now, these electronic monitoring tags are used to enforce curfews on more than 100,000 offenders each year. That's what they say anyway. And the outsourcing giant Capita took over the contract on an interim basis in April of last year. And in July 2014, Capita and three other companies were named as winners of a $265 million 6-year contract to supply the next generation, listen to this, of satellite tracking tags, which they are saying would allow dangerous and repeat offenders to be monitored around the clock. And if you believe that, pigs might fly. So, if these electronic tags, and they've got satellites to watch them, watch everybody really, why aren't the crime rates going down? Chelsea Clinton, oh boy, the frog-faced spawn of Satan, has now decided that she's not ruled out running for office one day, preferably in 2020. I don't think after your parents are paraded in the public, you're going to be anywhere near it, because you are a participant as well. Sorry. And she's describing a move into politics as a definite no now, but a definitely maybe in the future. And this was at the Edinburgh International Book Festival. Quite why she used there is beyond me. And she is aboard Donald Trump's presidency. Well, we've aboard your family and their criminal behaviour for far too long, and endured it for far too long. And funny enough, she was promoting her children's book. Her mother will tell her all about the children, except it won't be in a book. Oh, good Lord. Or bad Lord, I should say. And she's strongly criticised the US leader on issues such as the separation of children from their parents at the Mexican border. Oh my. Forgetting that it was Democrats who created that rule, including her mother. We'll have some figures on how many children have been saved later. But I have no patience for that frog-faced spawn of Satan. Venezuela. Just to let you know, the Trust have tried to help extensively, and there's a lot of fun and games going on there, like many other South American countries and African countries and some other countries around the world. They have now started introducing economic reforms, including new banknotes that lop 5 zeros off its fast depreciation currency as the country battles hyperinflation. This is due to the IMF and the clowns, Rothschilds, printing Bolivar from the De La Rue company. That's why. And they're all fake. Now, as of Monday, the banks will close as they prepare to release the new sovereign Bolivar. It's not. Amid warnings from the IMF economists that Venezuela's inflation rate could exceed 1,000,000% this year. Yes, it's the IMF who are causing it. Now, it's funny that the article mentioned that a chicken, which is mentioned in a show not too far from here recently, is now 14 million Bolivar. And this was mentioned in the previous show about 5 or 6 weeks ago. Now, in the same show, I mentioned that we grow enough food each year for 3 planets. Now, the next news item is from the same newspaper. Seems they've been listening to our show. The amount of food that is wasted each year will rise by a third by 2030, according to analysts. Yeah, right. No, it won't. When 2.1 billion tonnes will either be lost or thrown away, which is equivalent to 66 tonnes per second. Now, the report by the Boston Consulting Group warns that the global response to food waste is fragmented and inadequate, and that the problem is growing at an alarming rate. Deliberately, in my opinion, and the report suggests the creation of an eco-label similar to fair trade campaigns to encourage customers to buy from companies that have committed to reducing waste. Yeah, and we all know which companies they'll be. Walmart. Or not. And the scale of the problem is one that will continue to grow while we're developing our solutions. Now, you've had 100 years to develop solutions, or at least 80 years since the Second World War, and have done nothing, because it's by design. You know, like I said, we're producing enough food each year to feed 3 planets. They choose to make 40% minimum, it could be as high as 60%, not have hardly any food or having to scavenge for it. And here we go. As population grows rapidly in certain industrialising parts of the world, like Asia, no, it's not. They're all plummeting. That's a lie as well. Consumption is growing very rapidly. No, it's not. Each year, 1.6 billion tonnes of food, worth approximately 1.2 trillion, goes to waste. And that is about 1/3 of the food produced globally. 1/3. 1 planet's worth. So there's still 2 planets worth left. Where's the rest going? Now, the United Nations, who don't have a clue what they're talking about on any level, including the Food and Agricultural Organization, well, they should be fired, estimates that about 815 million of the 7.6 billion people in the world were suffering from chronic undernourishment in 2016. That is a lie also. It's near to 40%. And they went on to say, obviously they love to throw in the climate change. Food waste and loss accounts for 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Oh boy. They may be stupid. We're not. More positive news coming out of Palestine. Don't be surprised if there's a major incident that blocks it, if history repeats itself, but we'll see. The Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh said Tuesday that an end to Israel's more than a decade-long blockade of Gaza was round the corner, as talks of a possible truce deal now intensifies. Indirect negotiations between Gaza's Hamas rulers and Israel, brokered by Egyptian and UN officials, have reportedly included a discussion on easing the blockade, but not completely lifting of it. Haniyeh also seemed to refer to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas' concerns over a truce that does not include his Palestinian Authority, so they're trying to go around them, which is based in the occupied West Bank. Abbas's Fatah and Hamas have been divided for more than a decade, and any agreement would have to come with a national consensus in order to establish the necessary safeguards to implement what was agreed on. So we'll see how that plays out, but maybe it's promising. We'll see. Reports coming out of Syria, and they're blaming Washington's absolutely deconstructive stance is hampering the rebuilding of Syria, and also constricts the UN in aiding the country. UN are not interested in aiding any country, I might add, until a so-called political transition can take place, and this is according to Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister. We are addressing UNESCO on how they plan to implement the long-term talks, the long-term understanding on attracting the potential of this organisation to rebuilding Palmyra, which is an ancient city that was destroyed. It's also a World Heritage Site. Part of the issues to do with the Middle East and certain other regions where war is taking place is to cover history and try to delete it. Not all of it's about oil. Very rarely do the cabal go into any country for one specific reason. There's always 2, 3 or 4. But the fact that they targeted Palmyra was indicative. Now, from the explanations of why UNESCO has still been unable to get involved in this process actively, we took that there was some kind of a directive from the United Nations headquarters in New York. Exactly. He said that the UN Secretariat, which is the organisation's executive arms, has actually issued and distributed a secret directive throughout the UN system in October last year that prohibited the agencies included in this system from participating in any kind of projects aimed at restoring the Syrian economy. Blocking it. They said only humanitarian aid and nothing more was allowed. Well, humanitarian aid is to provide more weapons and food to ISIS. That's what that means. Now, the minister told journalists after talks with his Lebanese counterpart, Gebran Basil, in Moscow, a term was put forward that the restoration of Syria would only be on the agenda after certain progress is made in the so-called political transition in the country. And the Russian Foreign Ministry also said that due to the absolutely deconstructive stance from the US, one also shouldn't expect any positive decisions on rebuilding Syria and return of the refugees to the country from the UN Security Council. No, because they want Halliburton and Eric Prince and all kinds of other goons to go in and rebuild it and make money. Verizon Wireless has come under attack, and this next piece borders on utter stupidity and quite how the country operates in that manner is beyond my understanding and any sort of common sense. But as the wildfires raged in California this summer, one fire department's response was impeded by an unexpected problem: data throttling. In other words, they cut it back. Now, in documents filed this week as part of a legal challenge to the FCC's net neutrality repeal, Santa Clara County Fire Marshal Anthony Bowden explains how Verizon slowed down device speeds during the crisis, hindering the firefighters' response. Now, the documents, which is flagged by Ars Technica, Bowden writes that the fire department had purchased an unlimited data plan from Verizon for a support unit connection, but the company, Verizon, started throttling speeds to 1 in 200 or less after the unit hit 25 gigabytes of use. And he goes on and said that the resulting throttling from Verizon had a significant impact on our ability to provide emergency services during the fires, as responders were unable to properly track and route firefighting resources. The company continued to slow data speeds even after being informed it was actively impeding the responders' ability to fight the blazes, and the only solution was that the fire department had to sign up for a new, more expensive plan before speeds were restored whilst the fires were ongoing. How are emergency services tied to contracts like that? It's beyond me. And Verizon better have a solution, and quickly. Perhaps it needs another executive order, because it should be unlimited per se. You would think with common sense that would be the case. Appears not. So people have lost homes, people may have died, livestock may have died, all because Verizon choose to play games. It beggars belief. Latest person to put who's now eyeing a run for Congress, Mr. David Hogg. He of Parkland shooting fame, and he's apparently going to apply when he's 25 years old, which is the youngest you can hold a congressional seat. Mr. Hogg was declared a hero after being involved in the shooting, which was a lie. And also his age is also a lie. David Hogg was 3 miles away. He got on his bike and rode down. He was not a hero. He wasn't even there. And David Hogg was 25 years old last year. We don't need clowns like him running for anything. We've got enough in there already without adding more goons.